What's up, wild side besties and baddies? I'm Bailey.
And I'm Chelsea, and we're here to walk you through the wild sides.
From homicides to hosticides and everything in between.
We're so glad you're here, so buckle up
and enjoy the ride.
Wednesday. It is Wednesday again.
But guess what day it is? It's Serial Killer Wednesday.
Wild Side Wednesday. Ooh, ooh.
Yeah, so I am bringing you guys a serial killer case today.
Oh, wait a second. You were like, it's Serial Killer Wednesday. And I was like, that's what we always cover. And then I was like, no, wait, we never cover serial killers.
No.
Oh, this is exciting.
This is exciting. And
serial killers that's a mixed bag. Some people love listening about serial killers, learning about serial killers. My sister-in-law hates it. She is not a fan of serial killers. She doesn't have any inkling. She didn't care to hear anything about serial killers.
This one might be one of those cases that fits both molds because there are only 2 known victims.
Okay.
And a lot of other potential victims, but literally this whole case is about the 2 of the victims.
Okay.
And we've got weird ass people. We've got fetishes. We've got the whole, what is that called? Gander? The whole
shebang? The whole gambit?
Gambit, maybe? Take a gander at the whole gambit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like gaggle of gooses?
Gaggle of gooses. Yeah. And so the only housekeeping thing I will say is if you guys are tuning in, thank you so much. If you could do us a favor, please, kind of the obligatory, please go and leave us a review. We would really appreciate it because that is just the nature of podcasting.
It really is. And it takes literally 30 seconds. So I'm going to ask you to put that on your to-do list. Take 30 seconds of your entire week and just like us and review us. And it doesn't have to be a good review. You can leave us a bad review. Like, we're down for it. We're up for the challenge. It's all right.
That's all right. Just your honest feedback would be cool. And so this case is actually going to take place between 2 different countries. So we are going to be in Italy for half of it, in Italia. And then the other half, we're going to be back in the United Kingdom because you guys over in the UK, are y'all okay? You've got the Munchausen mama. You got a bunch of stuff going on over there. And listen, I think the U.S. leads with serial killers, so I'm not saying that we're great. I'm just asking if y'all are okay. I mean, y'all aren't South Africa wild, but you got some stuff going on over there.
Yeah.
All right, so we are going to start this off in Italy. This case is really complicated, and there's a lot, and it covers a big timeline. And so I kind of did it on how it unfolded. Okay. So a lot of podcasts have done it totally differently. I think it's fun, from that angle, is that there's a lot of ways that I could have cut this cake. But we are going to start in a small town. Well, it's not super small, but a town in Italy called Potenza.
Potenza. Fragile.
And this is in the 90s. And so I'm real excited about this. So one day in 1992, there was a 23-year-old woman, Angela Campochiaro, and she was attending a movie theater with her then fiance, Nicola Marino. The 2 were sat in a semi-deserted movie theater in Potenza, and Angela was sat next to her fiance. And you know how you sit in, like, you go to a movie theater and you have long hair, you throw it over the chair, right?
Yeah, correct.
Because if you put it between your back and the chair, it gets pulled and it gets flattened and it's a whole mess.
Yes.
So she sat down in this movie theater with her beautiful dark hair draped over the back of the seat. Not weird.
No.
And at some point into this movie, she felt a tug on the back of her hair. So her fiance turned around and kind of chewed this guy out who was sitting behind Angela. And so this guy quickly got up to move seats, but not before the jacket that he had covering his lap fell off, revealing the man's penis.
Oh, no. Oh, my.
So the man had been touching Angela's hair, and come to find out, he cut off 10 centimeters of her hair, a lock of hair, and masturbated right behind them in a theater before being caught.
Okay. Do you know that I had a similar experience? Do you know this?
No.
Okay. Now, mine was in a public school setting. There was no indecent exposure involved in mine.
I do remember this.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And I had super long curly hair. And I had flipped it over the back of
Oh,
our
I'm
Hancock High
cringing.
School chairs.
I'm cringing right now.
And I thought it got stuck in the little like bolt that screws the back on. And so I kept moving it like, oh gosh, why is my hair stuck?
Stop.
And straight up, this kid behind me, I finally hear him say, a yummy sound. Did you just make a yummy
No.
sound? And he said,
Your hair tastes like vanilla. Oh my
and
God.
I said, friend, I wouldn't put my hair in your mouth because you don't know where it's been. Because I didn't know what to say and I was trying to still be nice. And he said,
I'm sure it's fine.
and I went and told my friend Wesley, and when I told him the story, I told him wrong and I told him that it tasted like strawberry, and he called me strawberry. What did he call me for like the rest of the year?
Wasn't it like strawberry shortcake or
It was
something?
like, it was because I called him and it was like, I don't know, it was like strawberry lust or something like that. And he was like, you've got to be freaking kidding me that somebody was straight up chewing. I turned around and my hair was in the dude's mouth.
Well, there are some similarities, I think,
Well, crap.
between, we'll call this mystery human and RL, and then
Yeah.
this guy we're going to be talking about. Yeah, very similar. She had thrown her hair over the back of the chair.
Been there.
And this dude cut it off and he started masturbating. He started masturbating to it. And they were just like, what the hell are you doing? And come to find out, in this town in Potenza, and I'm sure I'm not pronouncing it correctly, I apologize, but here we are. Between 1992 and 1993, Angela was one of 9 women that had complained that some weird-ass dude was targeting them and cutting a lock of their hair. And this weird-ass dude turned out to be a guy named Danilo Restivo, but it would be years before he was identified as the hair fetishist that was terrorizing women in the 90s. There's going to be a lot of this stuff throughout this episode. So we're going to take a look at Restivo to find out who was this dude. And I just want to do a little disclaimer. These are the types of people, kind of, that I would work with, okay? I'm allowed to call them weird-ass dudes when I'm podcasting. And to be completely frank with you, I would kind of tell them that to their face when I was working with them.
I mean, true.
Like, I don't sugarcoat things with my clients. They're like, if I had a guy who came in and was like, oh, I cut some girl's hair at the movie theater and I was masturbating, I'd be like, okay, we don't do that. That's
weird.
super socially violating on so many levels, okay? A lot of people would call that really boundary violating and weird, which it is. And so let's figure out how we don't do this anymore, okay?
Yeah.
So just to be very clear.
Mm-hmm.
So Danilo Restivo was born on April 3rd, 1972, in the province of Trapani in Sicily, Italy. He and his family eventually made their way to Potenza, which was about 60 miles east of Naples. Now, Restivo's dad was well known, and he was an influential member of the community and was a director of the National Library. So he came from a family, even though they didn't have a lot of money, there was a kind of a word to describe members in this kind of upper echelon family kind of community, and his family was one of those. So they were very well connected, very respected. But Restivo was just weird. He was considered a loner. He was super strange and super socially awkward.
Yeah.
He stated that it was normal for him to spend time on his own, and it gave him time to think. So he definitely probably was like an introvert. And I want to refer to him as a simp because he's weird.
Okay. I wonder if he had a diary.
Probably made out of human skin with hair taped in it. So it became very clear to everyone who knew Restivo that he was a weird-ass dude who displayed some seriously alarming behaviors. By the time he was 14, he had tied a boy and a girl to a tree and cut one of them with a penknife.
I mean, I think our mom did that too, though.
No, she got in a fight with a lady.
No, when she was younger, that kid that was picking on her brother. And so she tied him up into a tree out in the woods. Or no, maybe they tied Stacy up into the tree. There was a tree and tying involved. Continue.
Well, I think this is a little bit different. So he had tied him up and cut one of them up with a penknife, but no charges were ever filed because why?
He had a super influential family.
Super well-connected, influential family. And it was reported that his parents settled the issue with the victim's parents out of court and away from legal involvement.
Okay.
Okay.
Fair enough.
Did I ever tell, do you guys know that I hate enabling?
No.
Okay. This is going to be a case where I am going to rant so much about parents who enable their weird ass children.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why you don't enable your people around you.
Yeah.
Okay. According to an article by Andy Martin, by the time Restivo was 20, so around 1992, the same year that Angela had her haircut in that movie theater, he was convicted of harassing 5 young girls who lived opposite his home in Potenza. He would incessantly call their house and threaten them. He would play the soundtrack of Profondo Rosso, which is a film about a serial killer who plays a specific melody before every murder.
Not cool, dude. Not rad.
So, like many weird-ass simp dudes, he did not take well to rejection and likely viewed girls as objects, which triggered weird fetishes and obsessions. Safe to say.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't view them as humans with their own autonomy and things that they bring to the world. I think that he viewed women simply as objects for selfish pleasure. And that, to me, is like such a terrifying combination.
I know. Yeah. Today's not a good day for me either on that subject. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. So, like, literally, one of the goals that we would implement when working with boundary violating behavior is, like, literally, we called it de-objectification. And so we had to try to help rewire this, I don't know, neural pathway in their brain that, like, women or men are just objects for sexual gratification. And we would have to, like, re-ingrain the humanity in them. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
And so when girls would reject Restivo, he would go on to harass them, not leaving them alone, and he would attempt to get dates with girls by ruses. This sounds a lot like our buddy, what's his name?
Bundy?
No, using ruses to lure victims.
Oh, like the Dominique?
Yeah. The Bayou Strangler.
Bayou Strangler?
So Restivo would do the same thing. He would claim to have a present for them so that they would meet him. He knew that he was this pathetic, weird-ass dude, and he had to manipulate and ruse girls into giving him the time of day because nobody wanted anything to do with them because he was fucking weird, right?
Yeah.
It was reported that, like, everybody around town knew he had this weird hair fetish, and he was actually known to police, and they're like, oh, yeah, that's the Restivo's kid who likes hair, and he's just real super weird. But we can't do anything because his parents are part of this, like, high society thing.
Not this inner circle, right.
And so the police believed that he was the one responsible for the haircutting instances, but they didn't have any evidence to arrest him or convict him or anything like that.
Right. He probably ate the hair after he was finished with it. He probably didn't leave any evidence.
Yeah, he's like a cat. He'd throw up fur balls because he's fucking weird.
Restivo, I stepped in your hairball again.
Sorry, Mom. Clean it up, sweet baby darling. God. It was also reported that he developed, like, sexual excitement from seeing blood, too. So, dude was just, he had all these weird fetishes left and right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this having a human hair fetish, fun fact, is called trichophilia, and it's when someone gets sexually aroused by human hair. You know, I think there's worse things, but
Hey, man. I mean, some people have luscious hair. Ask me about it. I'll talk to you about it sometime. It's a burden. It's a blessing and a curse to have luscious hair. Yeah. So, I mean, I think people hear the word fetish, and I always just think of foot fetish. Like, that's the only thing I ever think of is, like, feet. But I mean, I don't know. Like, what are fetishes, or how do you get to that point? Like, do you just wake up one day and you're like, I really get off on feet, or what is that whole process?
Mm, I'm not like the leading fetish expert, but I do know that fetishes usually develop in childhood, during your preteen, teen years. They can develop in adulthood, but usually it's after someone has like a particularly intense or pleasurable sexual experience involving like whatever that object is, right? And so, like, the
Okay.
dude who licked your hair was probably, watching My Little Mermaid with his little sister, and then he had, hit puberty and he got hard, and then he was just like, "Oh, red hair," and you know what I mean? Like, it wired in
Mhm.
his brain. And
Yeah.
so ever since then, the, like, viewing of red hair is, or, in this scenario, in this hypothetical scenario, it's kind of like a,
Okay.
oh, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So essentially some connection is built between some inanimate object and sexual pleasure. Right.
Mhm.
And there's not a, I mean, there might be a rhyme or reason for it, but I'm sure they don't really even know why they have a fetish for it.
Yeah, I think, like, when I've worked with people with specific fetishes, some of them are like, I know the exact moment
Mm.
when it developed,
Hmm.
and then some of them were just like, it was kind of all of a sudden, like, I didn't mind feet, but then, I woke up and I loved it or something, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
And
Do you think it goes
usually,
hand in hand with like obsessive compulsive disorder? Do you think there's any sort of obsession around it as well?
mm,
Probably not.
no, I don't think so. I'm sure there's an expert out there that could tell me or could
Hmm.
tell us, but I think those are two kind of
Yeah, separate fields.
separate fields. I was gonna say ponds, but yeah.
Yeah, separate ponds.
And they're usually associated with people who have some sort of like shyness towards the sex of their attraction, or like lots of
Oh,
fear or
uh-huh.
fear of sex or something like that, physiological dysfunction.
Okay.
And there's three types. So you have like fetishes with an inanimate object, like a bra or panties or shoes.
Okay.
And then you have the second type is towards a body part. So, like you said, feet or hair. This was
Hmm.
Restivo's thing. And then the third one can be kind of like, it's kind of weird to understand, but it's like a refined trait, like a deformity or like a little quirk that they become kind of like obsessed with. So it could be like somebody who's morbidly obese,
Mm. Hmm.
right? So it's not necessarily because then you have some like kink and fetish communities with people who are morbidly obese and they have like feeders
Oh, yes. Yes, I
where
have.
they feed them. So that's kind of like a fetish.
Did someone say steak? Do you speak though?
Yeah. So, okay, up until this point, Restivo was acting out on his fetishism, had been harassing girls, and he was a bitch. That's what
Yeah.
I said.
Yeah.
But as probably predicted, this started escalating, right? It always does.
Always does.
And in 1993, Restivo became fixated on a 16-year-old girl. Now, by this point, I think he was like 21, something like that.
Hmm.
And so he became fixated on a 16-year-old girl, not woman, girl, by the name of Elisa Claps.
Okay.
So Elisa was a student in her, what we would say in the States, she was like a junior in her high school in, I don't know how to pronounce this, Liceo Classico in Potenza.
Uh-huh.
She grew up in a super close-knit family, was the youngest of three. Her parents referred to her as their pride and joy.
Yeah.
Her dad was a tobacconist, which I didn't know that was like a formal thing, which is super rad. And her mother worked part-time in the local land registry office.
Okay.
She had two older brothers, Gildo, and he's going to come up a lot. He was a law student, and Luciano, who was coming up on military service.
Okay.
So she was the baby of the three.
Uh-huh.
And so, like many families in that area, the Claps were very devoutly Catholic, and
Uh-huh.
Elisa was very involved in her church
Yeah.
since she was born.
Yes.
She was a super good student. She made good grades, and she had the goals of becoming a doctor. She was happy-go-lucky. She was kind and giving, just the sweetest little
Yeah.
girl.
Yeah.
It was reported that Elisa was nice to Restivo, despite him being a weird-ass dude, because she felt sorry for him, right? Like, people knew he was weird, and she was just very nice to him, and he was a loner, and she was just like, "Yeah, it's okay." But Elisa wasn't stupid, right? She kept her distance from him because, again, she knew that he was just this weird dude.
Right.
So she was nice to him, but she kept her distance from him.
Right. It was cautious.
Yeah. And she would often, keep her distance, and she would get annoyed with him
Mhm.
because Restivo would just be so weird. His behavior was so weird, and she would journal about it, just being like, this guy's just so weird. But, when you're 16, you don't know how to set those types of boundaries.
You really don't.
You know what I mean?
I think women struggle with that more than men.
Yeah.
I mean, I know I didn't. So I'm assuming that they just knew each other because they were in the same community, right?
Yes.
Like
They
they
lived
just
close by each other.
okay.
Mhm. Yeah. And I think that Restivo became kind of obsessed with her.
Mm,
He
mm,
fixated on her.
right.
And so, kind of spoiler alert, she does disappear. Okay, and we're gonna get into that a whole lot. But a month before she disappeared, she was on holiday with her family, which
Mhm,
in another village on the Ionian coast.
mhm.
While she was away on holiday, Elisa saw Restivo in the same small village.
Oh, snap.
And she became uncomfortable, and she was walking with her brother Gildo. Her brother was like, "Is this like, why is he here and is he bothering you?" And
Mhm.
she was kind of like, "Listen, it's really no big deal. He's kind of a weird dude. I don't like him, but he's not really ever done anything,
Right.
over the top." And
Right.
so Restivo walks up to Elisa and was like, "Take a walk with me, milady." Like those weird dudes with the, what are they called?
Like LARPing.
Fedoras? Yeah. Fedoras with a feather, who, like, take those online classes about how to be, like, an alpha male. So weird. I hate it so much. So he walks up to her, and I'm sure he did the little hand wave and
Oh,
tilted his head and said "milady" in Italian,
you
and Gilda was like, "Bro, fucking go away. You're weird.
yeah.
Just no means no, go." Restivo finally left. And so Gilda was like, "Sis, who is this dude? I don't like it." And what he said was, what's so kind of haunting is he said, "I don't like the way he looks at you."
Mm.
Yeah, ugh, you can see stuff like that in people's eyes. You know what I mean?
Yes, you can.
And his brother was like, "I don't like the way that he looks at you."
Yeah,
And she was just like, "Again, he's lonely, he's weird. C'est la vie. It's no big deal. Just let it go."
I know. I don't wanna be
So
mean. Everybody heard it just seems like everybody is mean to him, and I don't wanna be mean to him, and
yeah.
no, I get it, man. Been
And
there.
she's trying to leave it alone. Like, if I just leave it alone, he'll leave me alone,
Right.
right? And so fast forward to September 11th of 1993. That evening, Restivo calls up Elisa about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and he was asking for a date, pretending he had a love interest for a friend of hers and he needed suggestions. He also told her that he had a gift for her for passing her school exams. And so Elisa, feeling sorry for him, agreed to meet him the following day.
No, no,
But
no.
the smart thing is she met him in the most public place possible, which was the Most Holy Trinity in the center of the city. So at church.
Okay.
She was like, "I will meet you at church at
Okay.
right after mass." So the following day on September 12th, Elisa met Restivo in the church just after mass ended around 11:30 that morning. Now, she was seen going into the church, but was never seen leaving. She seemed to just totally vanish, and it was, as a lot of people who lived in that area was like, it was perplexing and inexplicable because there was just no
Yeah,
explanation for it.
right.
So I think it's safe to say that immediately people, especially Elisa's brother Gildo, suspected Restivo because he was a weird ass dude, and he was one of the last people to see Elisa alive at the church. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
What started unfolding after this is Restivo arrived home. So after mass ended, he went home, but it was about an hour and a half after mass had ended.
Uh-huh.
And police, because they did notify the police, and the police went ahead and started questioning close family people. Gilda was like, "Hey, this dude's weird, and I'm sure it's him."
Uh-huh.
And so when they questioned him, he told them that he was at the church. He did see Elisa there, but she left and he stayed to pray. Then they asked him about the cut on the back of his hand, and he claimed that he got it from a building site nearby. Like, "I just, walked through this building site." I'm sure people are like, "Yeah, it's probably where you stash your can of fucking hair clippings. Like, you're weird." But nobody could corroborate Restivo's whereabouts during that 90-minute gap. Nobody really knew where he was. When Gildo went to the church, so he went back to the church, he found the priest in charge, Domenico Sabia. He had left. He left to go somewhere. And he took the only key that gave access to the upper story of the church building with him. So there was nobody around that could go and take a look. Gildo reported the disappearance of his sister to the police, like I said, but he was at first told the matter had no urgency. So they checked into it and they were like, like, try not to be too weird about it. I'm sure she's getting bread or doing something.
Right.
And so later that day, Restivo left Potenza and went to Napoli. They went to the church and they're like, hey, can we search the church? And the church was like, no.
Como se why?
Because it's a sacred house of God that doesn't need to be desecrated by unholy things. I don't know.
Okay.
And then the Restivo family declined the police's request for clothes that Restivo had been wearing that day to be handed over. So the police were following these leads. They went to the Restivo family and they were like, hey, can we have the clothes that Restivo was wearing that day? And they were like, no.
Oh.
Nope. And, this is the thing. Restivo's family, like one of these Italian reporters that was following this case for a long time, Pierangelo Maurizio, he said that Restivo's family never understood him, but protected him, quote, more than would be normal in this situation.
Yeah.
So they put all these barriers in place for, the Claps families and the police to investigate what happened to Elisa. Again, why I hate enablers. Okay, so the police were stuck and they were running up against these walls because the church wasn't letting them search, and Restivo's family kind of built this gridiron barrier for any sort of lead or investigation into him. The police, though, were still like, we're pretty sure that Restivo's involved, but there's nothing, like, we don't have anything to tie him to it. There's no proof.
Yeah.
Fast forward 3 years. 3 years after Elisa's disappearance in 1996, Restivo was formally charged with giving false evidence to the police. So they had been investigating this, and it took this long to talk to people and figure things out. And so he was charged with giving false evidence to the police. And I think that was about his alibi and whatnot. And so they knew that he was lying about it. And he had testified that he had met Elisa in a curtained area behind the altar before she left minutes later. And he also had admitted that he had previously taken girls to a room on the first floor of the church. But again, there was no body. And the police weren't convinced that Elisa didn't leave the church because nobody in this town could really believe that she would be in the church. So they felt like he was lying. He did something. And here we are. So tried along with Restivo were a couple of other people. One was an Albanian man, and another person was a close friend of Elisa's. And so her friend, this best friend, told police that she saw Elisa go into the church, but she never came out. And the police were like, now you're lying. That's cap. And they arrested her for giving false evidence.
Okay.
Yeah. The prosecution appealed against the acquittal of Elisa's friend. At a second trial, she was found guilty on a charge of perjury, and she was sentenced to 14 months imprisonment. And that was later overturned by the Italian Supreme Court. What? So this best friend who went there with her was just like, she went in, she didn't come out, and the police were like, no, that's cat. You're lying.
Okay.
And they arrested her, and they arrested Restivo, and she got a sentence of 14 months, and it was later overturned. And Restivo was convicted of giving false evidence. He was sentenced to 20 months in prison, but short sentences are suspended in Italy, and so he remained free without restriction on his movements. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison, but did not actually serve any of it.
Do they also buy their groceries with Monopoly money? Like, what? What is going on? What's happening, Italy? Are y'all okay? Are y'all okay?
And so, like, your response right now, and I know y'all are just like, what are you talking about, Bailey? Like, what is this false evidence, lying, this friend? Yeah, it's crazy. And this town exploded, and this became a huge national case for Italy for years and years. For the years following Elisa's disappearance, for the city of Potenza, the case would become a total obsession, and there was conspiracy after conspiracy after conspiracy about what happened because there was no body. There was no physical evidence. There was nothing. She went into church after mass and disappeared. There were theories from sex trafficking, that she moved away on her own, that she left town with an Albanian dude or went to Albania. It was just absolute chaos. And Elisa's brother Gildo, he had set up a website on her disappearance to keep up with leads that would come in.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point, he received an email that was supposedly from Elisa claiming that she was alive and well living in Brazil and did not want to be contacted. And so Gildo, being this cool dude, was just like, that's weird. So he traces the email back, and sure enough, the email was sent from a cafe in Potenza. And when they got there, who just left?
Dude, friggin' hair muncher. What's his name?
Restivo.
Restivo.
Yeah. And so the Claps family hired a private investigator because they were convinced that there was a concerted cover-up by the powers of Potenza.
Mm-hmm.
They were just like, there's something going on. Y'all are all hiding something.
Mm-hmm.
Attention also turned to the strange figure of Don Mimi, who was a priest at the Holy Trinity Church, and he was regarded as someone regarded with much power locally. And Don Mimi repeatedly obstructed any and all investigations. He refused access to the church, and his was the only church in Potenza not to ring bells for Elisa on the decade anniversary of her disappearance.
Oh, rude.
It was reported that many of his congregation were from the upper echelons of local, even national, like politics, and a former Italian prime minister.
Mm-hmm.
And so, due to all of these blocks, the Claps family's suspicions were so great that eventually the entire investigation into Elisa Claps's disappearance was taken out of local hands and moved to a town called Salerno that was like 120 kilometers away. Everyone was just like, this is Cap. The family pushed to have it moved from the town because they were just like, if people are involved, then we're not going to get anywhere with this investigation.
Right. They're all dirty. They're all in on it type of thing.
So it was taken out of Potenza and moved to Salerno. And Restivo was always the main person of interest in this case.
Mm-hmm.
And it was reported that he finally grew really uneasy with the pressure, so he decided to leave Italy altogether.
Okay.
So we are now in March of 2002. It's been 9 years since Elisa disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
And Restivo is finally making a move out of Italy. And he moves to England.
Okay.
He had met a woman on the internet named Fiamma Marsango and moved in with her in her home in Bournemouth.
Okay.
The pair lived at 93 Chatsworth Road on the corner of Capstone. And along with his arrival to Bournemouth, what do you think started happening in this area?
I'm sure like centimeters of hair started being cut from ladies' ends.
Starting in 2002, what would end up being 15 women and girls in Bournemouth were complaining about their locks of hair being cut.
Oh no. I wonder if he like had a steamer trunk full of hair that he sent over from Italy. You know, it was like the lockbox, like, don't look in this trunk.
Yeah. I
Hair
don't.
dolls.
Yeah, he probably did real weird shit with it. He probably got like extensions to his armpits. Like, I don't know. He probably did some weird stuff. And so nobody in this area was familiar with the same kind of similarity that happened 10 years prior to girls in a completely different country.
Yeah, for sure.
There was no outside connection to this. Okay.
Right.
When Restivo moved with his girlfriend that he met online, he moved in across the street from a woman named Heather Barnett.
Okay.
And I'm just going to give a background about Heather because she is the second main player or person in this case.
Mm-hmm.
Heather Barnett was born in August of 1954 and grew up in Dorset. She was described as a feisty and independent person by her family, super hardworking, who would do anything for anyone.
Mm-hmm.
Heather was previously in a relationship with a guy named David, and they ended up splitting up in the 1990s. The couple did have 2 children, Terry, who was born in 1987, and Caitlin, who was born in 1991. It was reported that Barnett lived frugally, and I'm bringing all this up because it kind of plays into the dynamics. And so Heather lived frugally. It was reported that she didn't watch much TV because she didn't want to waste electricity. And she also worked out of her home. So she was a seamstress and she lived and worked in the bottom part of this flat, and her former mother-in-law and her grandmother lived in the flat above.
Okay.
I'm sure they were cordial.
Okay.
Now, there were some interactions with Heather and Restivo, but by all accounts, because he's a really weird dude, she was also really nervous around him and didn't get good vibes from him either.
Uh-huh.
A former boyfriend of Heather's, a dude named Rodney Brown, would later go on to say that Heather was even scared of Restivo.
Mm.
And so she just really limited her contact with him.
Yeah.
But everything kind of came to a head in November of 2002. So he got there in May, and this is November.
Bailey, have you ever had any clients that you were like, I feel very uncomfortable with this client? Because
Yeah, I've had
you're usually really good as far as like, yeah, I mean, they're whatevs. Have you ever had any that were just like, this is bad. This is real bad.
Yeah, there was one that really worried me. I definitely thought that he was going to reoffend and he was a threat. And turns out he had a certified sex offender therapist, a CSOT, back where he was referred. She was like a psychologist. And when I called her, so this was residential, and I called her and was just like, hey, these are some of the reports that he told me that he's done. And she's like, oh, he didn't share that with me. And I was like, I mean, that's why, I had him sign a release. That's why I'm communicating with you. And I essentially told her, I was like, we are going to make the recommendation that he go to a different place. Like, we don't recommend that he go home when he leaves here because I think he's going to reoffend.
Uh-huh.
And this woman spent the next 15 minutes chewing me out about how I was poaching her clients and I wasn't sending her clients back to her, and what kind of business model did our company have.
Oh, okay.
So, isn't that crazy?
That is crazy.
And she was just like, I will take care of this. Like, I will watch him. And I was just like, you are so enmeshed in this dynamic. Like, it's so unhealthy. And I told her that. I was just like, this is really, like, this is a scary dynamic right now, that you're not saying absolutely, thank you so much for sharing like these assessment results.
Yeah.
I didn't see this. And, I just talked to my supervisor about it. And she was like, just make sure that you document clear as day the recommendations that you made. So if he does reoffend, it doesn't come back on your license. So, yeah, sometimes they're not so good therapists and practitioners out there. So, okay. So Restivo was a creep. Now we're in November 2002. Restivo went over to Heather's house because he was going to ask her to make some curtains for his, I don't know, girlfriend, fiance, whatever, Morsongo. He told Heather that he wanted a set of curtains made for his wife as a Christmas present. What does this remind you of?
Oh, so that's what he pulled with Elisa, where he was like, I want to meet you. I want to give you a gift. I want to hook up with your friend. Nothing to do with you. Everything's fine between us. It's super normal.
Yeah. So it was the same MO, exactly. And when he left her house, Heather noticed that her spare key was missing.
Nope.
So after Restivo left, Heather ended up writing his fiance a note, and it said, Fiamma, Dan popped over to see me this morning regarding a surprise for you. Don't ask questions and spoil it. I had a spare door key for Terry out on the table, and I think Dan must have picked it up inadvertently as I've turned the place upside down and can't find it anywhere. There was no response to that, and we're going to get there. And so this was super disconcerting to Heather. She ended up changing her locks, like, good job on you.
Yes.
She changed her locks, and in an email that she had sent to her sister, she said that she suspected a neighbor who wanted custom curtains was the person behind taking this key. She didn't say his name, but she said our neighbor who wanted these curtains made.
Right.
And so on November 12th, 2002, Heather woke up to a rainy, dreary day and got her children ready to take to school. Heather drove her children to school, dropping them off around 8:30 that morning. Around 4 p.m. that afternoon, Heather's children, Caitlin and Terry, came home from school. When they got home, the radio was still on, but they didn't hear an answer from their mother. Super weird. She worked from home. She was a seamstress, and she was always there.
Yeah.
So Caitlin walked around the home, calling to her mother, and when she came to the bathroom, she started screaming. Terry ran up and later would say to the police that he saw his mother lying on her back with blood, quote, absolutely everywhere, which made him think it wasn't an accident.
Oh, my goodness.
So her children discovered her in their house. And at this time, I think they were like 11 and 14.
I get that you can't bring logic into stuff, but it just is so beyond me when these perpetrators assault, murder, whatever their victims, and leave them for like children to find. I mean, I know
Yeah.
they don't care. I know that that's not something that goes through their mind, or maybe it is. Maybe they're like, good, I hope her kids find her. But how
Yeah.
do you do
And
that?
we're going to get into like some of the kind of details and how horrific it was for the children.
Ugh.
Obviously, police were called. When they came in, they discovered no signs of forced entry. There was no broken doors. There was nothing that indicated that this person forced their way in.
Right.
So the assumption was either this person had a key to get into the house or she knew this person and let them in.
Right.
So police began processing the scene, and it was clear that Heather was brutally, brutally attacked. They believe that she was killed in her sewing room. She was hit over the head with a hammer, a hard object, because there were blood splatter stains on the room indicating a cast off of some sort.
Oh,
Then there was a trail of blood from her sewing room all the way through the living room and finally into the bathroom where she was found. Heather had been viciously killed and mutilated. In the bathroom is where they think that the mutilation happened. Her throat had been cut from ear to ear, and it was so deep and it cut the vocal cords and her esophagus that it cut through skin tissues right down to her spine. Her bra had been cut between the cups on the front side,
yeah.
and both of Heather's breasts had been cut off and were placed on the floor beside her body.
Wow.
The most chilling thing was that a lock of hair was found in Heather's right hand, but it was not her hair, and it was not hair that she pulled out during an attack.
Oh.
There were strands of someone else's hair of a light brown color that had been placed in her right hand, which rested on her lower belly. And so it looked like it was like placed that way. Obviously, it was on top of her stomach and her hand was holding the hair.
Right.
And they still never found out like whose hair that was. And there was also some of her own hair that was cut and was under her left hand. So the hand that was on the ground had her hair underneath it that had been cut. And then an unknown hair in her other hand that was resting on her stomach.
Right.
And so the Dorset Police's major crime investigation team, the MCIT, who were over this investigation, quickly began a pretty thorough investigation.
Right.
And so early on, they were convinced that whoever killed Heather knew her, and this person was likely a local.
Right.
They felt that the killer lived somewhere close to her residence because when the police canvassed the neighborhood, there were no reports of any eyewitnesses saying that they saw a stranger, an unknown person around the home. And they also believed it was just too much of a coincidence that, like, the timing of her attack.
Right.
And so they felt like they knew her schedule.
Right. Yeah, like not like a burglary that had gone wrong, middle of the night situation that sometimes can happen. But yeah, like this doesn't happen in the middle of the day on a Tuesday type of thing.
And the police they quickly identified that Heather's murder had been planned with chilling precision by a killer that was incredibly forensically aware. They believed there was some evidence at the crime scene indicating that the killer had worn gloves due to a number of dark fibers found at the crime scene. And there were also no fingerprints belonging to anybody outside of the family.
Okay.
The police also suspected that the killer brought a change of clothes with them.
Okay.
Police traced blood that was found in the apartment using luminol, and based on the faint footprints, it appeared that the killer walked from the bathroom towards her sewing room. The footprints then stopped at the hall beside the front door, which indicating that the person brought a change of shoes or took their shoes off.
Oh.
And so initially investigators were completely baffled. There were no reported enemies, no clear motive. Her body had been horrifically mutilated. Someone else's cut hair had been placed in her hand, and they believe that the killer even brought their own murder weapon and a change of clothes. So they were like, this person planned this out. This is not like a break-in entry. She interrupted a burglary or something.
Right.
And this department had never seen anything like this before. They were just like, this shit is crazy.
Right.
So they quickly began to find out like what Heather's whereabouts were that morning, and they identified that she was killed shortly after dropping her kids off at school and arriving home.
Gotcha.
There was footage that showed her turning onto her road right after school,
Uh-huh.
and that's when the medical examiner essentially identified the time of death.
Gotcha.
And just a little point here, the kids, when they found their mom, they obviously left the house waiting for police, and they ended up waiting at Restivo's house for police to arrive.
What?
And he was consoling them and all of this.
Oh my gosh.
And so that evening, the police brought in Restivo and his fiance for questioning, not as far as we think it's you, but
Right.
anybody who knows,
Yeah, routine. You are a neighbor of hers. Did you see anything? Yeah, sure.
exactly. And at that kind of initial interview, Restivo kind of just pulled out a bus ticket with a timestamp of 8:44, and he was like, "Oh yeah, sorry, like I was on a bus at the time that she was killed." And he stated that he had been at the Lion Works building on Wallace Down Road until about 3:45 in the afternoon. And so the cops were like, "Okay, I mean, thank you very much for providing that, but we weren't
Yeah, didn't ask.
quite there yet.
Yeah.
We weren't quite there yet, but what else?" So he vomited all this information, and police were like, "Well, now we just need to follow up, right?"
Mm-hmm.
And so they ended up seizing the computer that he supposedly used the day of Heather's murder. And on the following day, police showed up at Restivo's house asking both him and his fiance to provide samples of their DNA so they can rule him out.
Uh-huh.
So over the course of the few days, they followed up with the computer and they ended up getting some DNA samples.
Uh-huh.
The two were cooperative. They both provided samples of their hair, mouth swabs, and fingerprints. But it was during this visit to Restivo's house that police officer saw that Restivo had some Nike trainers soaking in bleach in a bathtub. And they were like, "Dude, this is super weird. Like, why are you soaking your Nike trainers in bleach in the bathtub?" He was like, "Oh, I'm just cleaning them."
Mm-hmm.
So they seized them. They're like, "That's weird. Can we take those?" And so he was like, "Cool." And I was like, shout out to these cops so far, because
Yeah.
this whole investigation, it's a long investigation, but it seems pretty thorough.
Mm-hmm.
And so during this time, police also found out about the missing key because they spoke to Heather's son, Terry. And so Terry had told them just a week before she was killed, they had a neighbor, an Italian man named Danny, because they referred to him as Dan and Danny, had come to the apartment to inquire about curtains. So obviously police were like, this is real super weird, right?
Right.
When they asked him about the key, he was just like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So as we all know, investigations usually take a long time. And Restivo wasn't initially a suspect. Like, so the first 3 months of the investigation, like they're getting this stuff, it's unfolding,
Right.
but they weren't initially like, this is our guy.
Yeah.
And so that was until they got a breakthrough that happened about 6 months later in May of 2003. And this is where they finally had figured out, they had uncovered that email that Heather had sent to her sister
Oh,
talking about the neighbor and the curtains.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
This is whenever they were like, oh, this is probably something we really need to look into.
Yes.
And so they also looked into his alibi. So police visited that building that he was supposed to have been at, and there was a log where students would sign out floppy disks back in the day when we had floppy.
I was going to say, back in the day when we had floppy disks.
And so on the day of the murder, they found Restivo's sign out, but this dumbass accidentally wrote like the real time, like initially like knee jerk, this is actually the time I'm here, and struck through it and then wrote 9 o'clock. So he wrote 10:28 and he was like, oh shit, this is supposed to be my alibi, and strikes through it and wrote 9 o'clock.
Oh, man.
You know what this part reminded me of? You know that meme? It's my favorite meme, and it's that like big chick sitting eating a bowl of ice cream, and the narrators are just like, and he left single hair at the crime scene, and she's like, fucking dumbass. That's what it reminds me of.
Yes.
So investigators were like, this dude's weird. So they did a search on him, and this is where they found that he was linked and he was a suspect in Elisa Claps's disappearance in Italy.
Oh, okay.
Right. And so police were just like, oh, snap.
Yeah.
And so this is where he started to become the prime suspect.
Mm.
And I think, you guys, that this, Chelsea, is where we might have to leave it for part 2, because
crap.
I just have a feeling that this is going to be almost like a 2-hour episode, and I'd rather have like 2 45-minute ones or 2 50-minute ones than have like one really, really long one and just release them a day apart.
I mean, the way this thing is going, I cannot even imagine like what else you have to say about this case. So I agree. I think
Yeah.
I think we should split this up because I am kind of on bated breath with this one.
Yeah. And so we're going to leave it here, and then we will release it the following day, or maybe just at the same time. I don't know. It's whatever we feel like doing.
Yeah. Or maybe on a Friday. We could do a Wednesday, Friday. Whatever.
Yeah.
Let's see where the wind takes us.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so we will leave it here, you guys, and we will catch you on the flip side.
All right, guys. Stay tuned. Hey, Wildside Tribe, don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Wildside Podcast.
Make sure to tune in on Wildside Wednesdays. New episodes will drop each Wednesday at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
We would love to hear from you, so if you have a wild case recommendation, email us at wildsidepodcast@gmail.com. That's wildside with a C. Or share your thoughts in the comments below.
As always, if you haven't heard it today, you're loved, you're worthy, and you're valuable. And we'll catch you on
The flip side.